Hi everyone, welcome to Nutrition Farms and welcome to season 3 of the How to Do It video series. That's proven quite popular, this kind of practical demonstration of some of the core concepts of nutrition farming. We're here today at Nutrition Farms in South East Queensland. It's a very wet looking day. We've found a rare spot where the light's playing for us. It's got just a bit of overgrown bush behind us, but we're going to talk, in this first little presentation, we're going to talk about chelation. Now, the simple thing is you walk out into your field, you notice this, what's called interveinal chlorosis, which means you've got the veins of the leaf have gone dark green and you've got some blotches and pale colours on your crop. And for argument's sake, you know your crop and it's a zinc deficiency and you say, okay, well, a kilo of zinc sulfate, just so you know, is 35% zinc, 350,000 parts per million of zinc. So that's plenty per hectare, a kilo of zinc sulfate, and that's $2, maybe $2.20. So why wouldn't you just do that? Why do people spend considerably more money than that $2.20 to buy a chelated trace mineral? And I'm going to explain the concept of chelation, and we're also going to talk about how you can do it yourself, basically, which is a lot of what the idea of these presentations is about. So basically, the word chelate in Greek means claw, and the problem with taking your standard zinc sulfate and diluting it perhaps in 100 litres of water and foliar spraying it over that hectare is that basically zinc's a positively charged cation and the plant's surface is very, very strongly negatively charged. And part of what you're doing when you foliar spray is trying to achieve this small particle size that basically will enter the stomate, the little breathing mouth on the underside of the leaf, very, very small, and we're talking about a 200 micron particle, hopefully, to get into that stomate. And the problem is that you've got this positively charged and a negatively charged leaf surface and positively charged zinc, and you've got this rush of a nail to a magnet, and you form a traffic jam at that little entry point, at that stomate. And you get about 6 to 8% of that 35%. That's how inefficient it is, because you clog the stomate and you can't get the entry point. And so what's chelation? Well, you take the claw, and that can be a chemical. Something like EDTA, for example, is a patented chemical derived for that purpose or developed for that purpose. And and there's also some natural chelating agents, and that's what we're going to talk about, because some of them are actually demonstrably better. And we're going to talk about how you can use them to do it yourself. But the idea is that you're taking that claw, that biochemical or chemical claw, and wrapping it around the zinc and neutralizing that positive charge. And then if it just happens to be that active ingredient or that claw is particularly small, and we'll talk about that, well, the smaller it is, the better it can smuggle that zinc directly into the leaf surface. And we'll talk about those whole concepts. So basically the idea is you're going to take a chelating agent, we'll talk about different choices, and you're going to add it to your zinc sulfate if you want to do it yourself. And you're going to have a chelated zinc, which is much, much more efficient. You're going to get most of that 35% zinc into your crop. So that's why you're going to spend the extra money or do it yourself, which we'll talk about. Now, just from our perspective in terms of state-of-the-art chelation, we have something quite special, and I'll talk about that before I teach you how to do it yourself, because if you're in a higher dollar value crop that you can justify what probably is the best, I think, on the market, it's something called the Shuttle Mineral Delivery System, and it's actually not chelation. It's a weird system developed by a South African chemist who discovered it by mistake when he was looking for a chelating agent for gold extraction, and then we discovered this tremendous side effect. It's called the Shuttle Delivery System, and basically we've got this concept where a substance called, first of all, when you combine, say, some shuttle chelating agent with zinc, this is called Shuttle 7. It's got all 7 trace minerals that are chelated, and it's a very popular product in a lot of countries. But basically the concept is that you've taken this chelating agent, well, not chelating agent, this delivery agent, and it's called a shuttle ligand. And first of all, there's this concept of creating this little holding pen, and the shuttle ligand, this biochemical, is attracted to the positively charged zinc. It grabs them It's negatively charged, so it's attracted to positively charged zinc, grabs hold of a zinc molecule, and is then attracted with the positively charged zinc, its charge is changed, to the leaf surface. And it is drawn back magnetically to the negatively charged leaf surface. It bobs against the leaf surface, and it can be anywhere. It can be on the stem, it can be on the leaf, it can be on the top of the leaf, the underside of the leaf, on a dormant tree's trunk. There's a phenomenon called thermal vibration where everything is vibrating, and in the midst of that constant vibration, there are little pores that sometimes open. And when that bobbing shuttle with the zinc, bobbing on the leaf surface coincides with an opening, it pops it in, and now it's changed its charge back to negative, and it's drawn back to the little holding pen, grabs another zinc, bob, 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 pop, back to the holding pen, another zinc molecule, bob, and that's really unique. That's a first timer in terms of mineral delivery systems, and you can have all the different minerals, or you can have them all done together. So that's our commercial version of chelation at its finest. Now we'll talk about some pretty good ways that you can do it yourself, and it's going to be much more cost effectively. Now, probably the king or queen, or however you want to, whatever term you want to use, of natural chelation are humates. Humic and fulvic acid are both very, very capable natural chelating agents. In fact, fulvic acid is the most powerful known chelating agent of all of the options that can chelate. So fulvic acid, in this case, we're looking at this product. You can also have it in a soluble powder. This is straight fulvic acid. This Fulvex product is a soluble powder that's half humic acid and half fulvic acid. And what's unique about Fulvex is that it basically, humic acid usually got a problem because it doesn't go with things that are acidic. We've managed to doctor this up so that the humic acid stays soluble with everything. So it's very, very user-friendly, and you can get the dual benefits of both fulvic and humic acid in this instance with this soluble powder. So you could use either for the chelation purpose. So you're going to take your zinc sulfate, you're going to add maybe 300, 400 grams of Fulvex or fulvic acid in the soluble powder, preferably, it's cheaper. And that's the amount that will do the chelation. So even 300 grams is enough of the soluble powder with a kilo of zinc sulfate, and that's created that zinc fulvate or zinc humate in this instance, which is a wonderfully effective. And of course, humic and fulvic acid have both got a whole suite of benefits beyond chelation. So you're doing more than one thing at once. I mean, we've got this whole plant growth stimulation. There's a whole series of things, including what they do to soil biology. And of course, humic acid stimulating fungi and fulvic acid stimulating beneficial bacteria. So it's a wonderful win-win scenario to use them as a chelating agent. But there are other things you can use. And one of those is one of the sort of essentials in nutrition farming, and we're talking about kelp or seaweed. Now, seaweed contains quite high levels of a substance called mannitol, and mannitol is a very powerful chelating agent. So all of the 74 minerals, which is one of the reasons you might choose to use seaweed on the farm or as a livestock supplement, because you've got that spectrum of all 74 minerals from the ocean, but those minerals are all naturally chelated. So they're going to be much better uptaken by animals or plants due to that chelation with this substance called mannitol. But most people don't realize this. There's sufficient mannitol in kelp to chelate more than the minerals it contains. So when you add a little bit of zinc to kelp, for example, you create a zinc mannate, or manganese, you create a manganese mannate, and you've chelated that material. And so you've got all the benefits of kelp, the biggest of which, the highest known source of the 4 growth hormones that drive every aspect of plant growth: cytokinins, gibberellins, auxins, and betaines. Every single aspect of plant metabolism and growth is impacted by those 4 hormones, and that's really the secret of what you get with kelp, aside from that broad spectrum of minerals. So hugely another dual or multi-benefit substance to chelate with your kelp and have all those other benefits of kelp tossed in. Now, other options, so in our case, of course, when we talk kelp, we would talk about our largest seller in the world, this combination of 3 kelps that we guarantee will outperform any kelp you've ever used. And so far, we've never given the money back because it does outperform. It's this synergistic effect of 3 kelps combined, soluble powder, 1 gram per litre, super cost effective. And you can use it for its chelating capacity as well. So we talked about Fulvex. Why would you use Fulvex versus fulvic acid? in times when you've got things that can't be collated and you want to complex them. Now, a great example of that is if you want boron really important before flowering in almost every crop, and boron basically leaches very readily. Now, fulvic acid, the difference between fulvic and humic is a 10 times difference in size. Humic is much larger molecular size than fulvic, and fulvic can leach and humic doesn't. So if we're trying to hold a highly leachable mineral like boron, really the fulvic's not the ideal thing for it. We want to put humic with it, but then we want to put other things that clash with humic. Well, now we've got an option. We've got humic and fulvic together, so we can chelate our zinc that we add to our boron, for example, when we're trying to do many things at once, or maybe we're doing a bit of urea as a foliar spray at the same time as our zinc and our manganese or whatever else. And now we've got the capacity to have the best of both worlds, and it's turned into a huge product for us, this 50-50 combination of humic and fulvic acid called Fulvex. But what I'm going to talk about next is the potential of amino acids for chelation, because amino acids do so much more than chelation. That they're hugely, hugely important. We'll talk about some of the benefits of amino acids, and then we'll talk about a really exciting new addition to the amino acid products that are available on the market, and we'll talk about why it's superior and why I'm so excited about this product called Micro Amino Drive, or MAD, weird little acronym, but it works. So let's talk about some of the benefits of amino acids. Aside, of course, we've got chelation being a major benefit, and some of you may be familiar with, I think there's some products out of the US that are glycine. So glycine's an amino acid, and it's the smallest by far of all the amino acids. It's a tiny, tiny amino acid. And glycine chelation, particularly calcium chelation, because calcium is so hard to get into and around the plant. And when you chelate it with glycine, it's just this tremendous. I mean, we see it all the time on leaf tests. We don't actually sell it, but we measure leaf tests where people have used it. And this is tremendous. I mean, it's 17 minutes and the entire thing's uptaken because of that tiny size. So glycine is the key for chelation, but all amino acids, not all, but 9 or 10 of them are capable of really good chelation. And we'll talk about how you maintain that quality in the production of amino acids a little later. So chelation's number one and glycine's the best. Now, number two is root stimulation, and there's tremendous research on the capacity in fact, amino acids affect every stage of plant metabolism. They use for everything, including photosynthesis, is all the way through. There's amino acids pathways involved. But for example, with root stimulation, tryptophan, that's a major amino acid that's used as an antidepressant for humans, for example, and a very effective one. But tryptophan in plants is required to build something called indole acetic acid. And that's a huge root growth stimulant for lateral growth of roots and stimulation of new roots and so forth. It's a really important one, and tryptophan builds IAA, it's called, and gives you that increased root stimulation. And then there's a second thing called cell sensitization, which is another benefit of using humic and fulvic. They are really well known for this capacity to increase the permeability of the cell membrane so you can suck up a third more of whatever you put with humic and fulvic acid. Well, it turns out that amino acids have a similar capacity. They can increase cell sensitization, it's called, so that you suck up 20 or 30% more. Not quite as effective as humic and fulvic, but pretty close. So that's a tremendous benefit. Then there's the concept of moving nutrients around the plant where we're using pathways called phloem and xylem. And we see there's a whole range of amino acids involved in this process. Now, glutamine, for example, you've all heard of glutamine as a supplement for humans. Glutamine transports nitrogen from the roots up to the shoots, and that's one of its chief roles in the plants in terms of this nutrient translocation. There are several aminos that work on transporting calcium. The slug of all minerals doesn't move very well around the plant, and there are several aminos that can improve the translocation and movement of calcium around the plant. Now, some of you may have discovered, and you've heard me talk many times about urea as a foliar spray being the single most effective way to get nitrogen into the crop without any losses from off-gassing or leaching. But some of you may have discovered that if you put a little bit of amino acid with the urea, there's a tremendous synergy between the two. It might even be something like liquid fish that contains some amino acids or an amino acid product, but there's a tremendous range of benefits. And there's, part of it's involved in the amino acids that drive protein formation, which is what you want to create with your nitrogen. And there's also a whole bunch of enzymes that are involved in linked to amino acids that improve that urea response. So it's really a great way to boost nitrogen efficiency via foliar urea. And then there's the whole series of papers that have demonstrated how important amino acids can be at fruiting. We look at pollination and the efficiency of pollination. We look at fruit set, we look at fruit development, and all of them have this amino acid link. And you can, as a prime time before flowering or at the start of fruit formation, that you can foliar spray amino acids with some really, really promising results. Now, I talked about microamino drive, this new addition, and I'm going to talk about why it might be why I'm suggesting it's a very exciting new discovery. So the point of difference between microamino drive and other amino acids. Now, most of the amino acids on the market are created from taking soy, and there's a thing called acid hydrolysis, where you use things like sulfuric acid and phosphoric acid and sometimes hydrochloric acid to break down that protein and create the amino acids. Now, there's some problems with that, and that's the most popular amino acid on the market. There's some problems with that harsh extraction of the amino acids. You're breaking protein down into smaller and smaller chains, and the smaller, the better. Now, the problem with acid hydrolysis, the most common way of making amino acids from soybeans, is that you lose, during that very harsh process, 50% of that very good chelating capacity. We mentioned 8 to 10 of the amino acids that can chelate. 50% of that is gone through that process of a really harsh extraction. But there's another thing. You might have noted, if you've ever taken amino acids for humans, that it needs to be in the L form. Well, what happens basically with amino acids, and it's called racemization, there's a process where you actually convert the L form to the D form, which is much less well uptaken. You don't take the D form for humans, and really you shouldn't take it for plants, and that's the downside of acid hydrolysis. Now, this microamino drive is created in a weird way. I'll explain it quickly. A bunch of really, really unusual bacteria, because bacteria don't usually do the really hard to digest material, and we're talking wood bark. So we put these bacteria with wood bark, and they break down the wood bark, and they use the cellulose and the hemicellulose in the wood bark to create this vast suite of tiny, tiny amino acids. Remember, bacteria 500,000 on a pinhead. We're talking about a tiny creature, and we're talking about what squirts out its bottom, and it's very, very small. And it's, in fact, we'll talk about size in a minute and how important that tiny size is. It's equivalent to the importance of glycine and how well that can take things into the plant. So the comparative chelating power is one of them, and the fact that the L form becomes the D form, which is not so well taken up. And remember the new word, racemization, and that's how it's pronounced. I struggled with that in the last podcast. That's number one. So that's the point of difference. So these things are created from bacteria. It's completely natural. They're strengthened up, the bacteria removed from the equation, and you've got a completely biologically derived amino acid with 100% chelating capacity in a tiny, tiny size. In fact, let's talk about the average size of the aminos. You measure amino acid size in something called kilodaltons, or KDA, and basically the average size of the amino acids that are extracted from soy, the average size is 120 kilodaltons, KDA. The average size of these tiny things that squirt out the back of a bacteria are 5 KDA. We're talking ridiculously, ridiculously small. It's almost submicron. And that means that all of the amino acids in this mix can do something comparable to glycine, but much, much cheaper than glycine in terms of that incredibly small size that can smuggle and deliver so efficiently anything you put with it. So it's one of the most powerful chelating tools that I've ever worked with. And even without chelation, without adding something to it, there's this tremendous plant health response because these tiny things go in so efficiently. There's a third point of difference. So we've talked about comparative chelating power. We've talked about the average size of the aminos and this 24 times smaller, which is what it comes to, so particle size, 5 kDa. And then there's the percentage of small chain amino acids, because amino acids can go right out to 40 chains. And the soy-based products can be down to there'll be like 5 to 8% of them will be single chain. So you broke it right down to just one chain, and then they'll extend right out to 20 to 24 length chains. This is 18% one chain, and nothing is above, this is MAD, micro amino drive, nothing in there is above 4 chains. So that's unparalleled. That's not been available before. And that makes a huge difference to both collating and delivery and all those benefits that amino acids can bring to the picture. So you can see why I'm a bit excited about this new thing called micro amino drive, or MAD. Thanks.